Thank you. I thank the witnesses for their testimony. I represent rural America, represent South Dakota, and I want to make sure that as we move toward a greener transportation system that our needs and opportunities aren't left out of the discussion. Our transit systems certainly may not have developed quite as far as urban transit systems to date, but there are certainly challenges to overcome, but opportunities as well. The miles that we put on vans and buses, as most transit fleets offer services hundreds of miles away from base communities, is something that needs to be addressed. Most towns in South Dakota have to compete with cities for the incentive grants offered by the Federal Transit Administration and Federal Highway Administration to help upgrade to greener and more fuel-efficient vehicles. But many folks that I hear from in South Dakota are excited to take part in the new green transit system and are certainly doing their part to reduce emissions, utilize homegrown clean biofuels, and become more energy efficient. Moreover, many of our towns face the unique opportunity to be able to build up green, fuel-efficient fleets from the very beginning. For example, River Cities Transit in the state's capital city of Pierre, we pronounce it Pierre, not Pierre in South Dakota, as you know, is at the forefront of our state in utilizing E85 vehicles and other fuel-efficient vans and buses. They're also working to purchase the first hybrid van in the state to be able to be used for public transit. And they're excited to see if hybrid vehicles are a workable option in our state. Now, River Cities Transit is also working closely with many of the 9 sovereign tribes in South Dakota to help them build up their fleets with similar vehicles and encouraging their leaders to make smart decisions now that will save both money and reduce emissions. So I guess I'm wondering to what extent your organizations or other organizations that you're familiar with have been reaching out to rural communities to share with them strategies for developing green transportation systems, as well as anything that you're aware of in terms of organizations or initiatives to reach out to Native American tribes.
I can talk a little bit about that. The issue here is that let's look at Europe. In Europe, you have rural communities, you have urban communities, yet you have an integrated transportation system. And using alternative fueled vehicles in rural areas is really to an advantage, but they have to connect to someplace so they can go someplace, so they can go someplace, so they don't have to drive across the country to get somewhere. What we don't have is an integrated transportation system in this country that allows people that choice. You take a smaller trip with a van or a bus or a car that's alternative fueled to some train station so you can get to a place, so you can go to the city and move around really easily. You really have to focus on investment across the country that gets you there. In rural areas, true, there has to be some increased focus of providing that support for transit to do that. And then in the cities, you have to make sure that there's more fixed guideway systems in there so when you get there, you can move around. So you're not stuck thinking, I'm leaving Pierre, I have to use my car to get to Chicago.
I appreciate your point since South Dakota does not have Amtrak service.
I just want to say, Congresswoman, that one of the programs we're really working hard to develop is a fuel called biomethane, which is taken from biomass, and it can be the Swedes. I'm not sure if you were here earlier, but then when I mentioned it, but the Swedes are developing this fuel. It's a renewable form of methane, just like the natural gas that we use today. And I think there is a tremendous opportunity for rural communities, particularly agricultural industries, to take advantage of that as a local fuel source. And we would be very interested in working with the groups in your community in your state to help develop that fuel.
If I may, four very quick points. Number one of our most favorite bicycle-friendly communities in the U.S. is the Tucson area. And when they applied for designation as a bicycle-friendly community in 2006, they got the gold designation, and included in their application 2 Indian nations, the city, the county, the state DOT, the regional MPO, and it was a truly regional application and was one of the first times that really had happened, and all those different parties had worked together to put together a program like that. So we're beginning to be able to say, yes, we can answer that question in the affirmative. Second thing I'd say is that in many rural communities, they're an ideal size and setup, perhaps often with the exception of a U.S. highway or a state highway that might run through the middle of them and be a significant barrier. They're an ideal size and makeup for bicycling and walking, and we should not forget rural communities and small towns in the application of enhancement and other funds to make them more bicycle friendly. And there are perfect examples like the Mickelson Trail, which are not only great transportation corridors but a huge recreation opportunity. And studies from the province of Quebec to the Outer Banks of North Carolina to the city of Portland show the enormous economic impact of cycling on a local economy and the national economy, and some of that is in my written testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. And just for the record, the Mickelson Trail is through the Black Hills of South Dakota and very popular recreation, named after our late Governor George Mickelson in South Dakota.
I deeply appreciate your bringing back to the notion of how we're going to meet the needs of all of America. And I've enjoyed our conversations about rural and small town. And the point you raise is one that I hope we can pursue with the organizations that are represented here about scale of community, that we don't count some people out just because there are artificial formulas or constructs where they don't qualify. And the other thing is just the capacity, that there are many communities that you represent where there may not be the institutional support to be able to navigate these things, and being able to make them friendly is something that I appreciate your continually bringing us back to it. Dramatic lack of attention to Native Americans where transit is awkward, but if you don't drive, you're in trouble, and the application of technology. And I look forward to continuing that with you and subsequent efforts, because I think this is a missing ingredient that doesn't get the attention, and I appreciate your laser-like focus.
Well, thank you, Mr. Blumenauer. I, too, appreciate your genuine interest in addressing the infrastructure needs of communities large and small in every region of the country, particularly throughout the Great Plains region, as we've discussed, both in farming and ranching communities and Native American communities, and not just developing new infrastructure, but maintaining existing infrastructure. With this focus on transportation today, I appreciate your sentiment. Thank you.